back to Working Class Revolt. I'm one of your co-hosts, Dust James of Dust James Anti-Imperialist America, and I'm always honored to be joining us today. David Fox, co-host, Australian labor organizer. How you doing today, man?
Yeah, very good, very good. I'm just on the last stretch now. I've been self-isolating. Like I previously said in another video that I had to get back to Victoria very quickly on New Year's Day. But tested negative, which was great, but still have to see out this 14-day period. So next Saturday is the final day. I'm actually relieved now, but get that out of the way. But I've been we're doing a lot of reading, besides doing bits and pieces around the house, a lot of study. As Filipino comrades correctly point out, love yourself, improve your study.
Right on, man. And we have a very wonderful co-host with us today. We're very honored to have with us Keaten Mansfield. He's part of National Agricultural Commission. He's also part of Students and Youth for a New America. Everybody give him a hand out there in virtual world. How are you today, brother?
Oh, Dust, I'm doing great. It's so good to be back on a live with you and being right back in the fore.
Right on, man. If people want to go back and check out that interview, he don't even look like the same person. Time goes fast when you're that young. Time goes by faster, I guess. People grow up quicker. A lot has happened since that interview, no?
Well, Dust, I always hear from my folks, you're 17 going on 40.
All right. Okay, so we'll get right into the nuts and bolts of this. We hold these Working Class Revolt show as an old school communist work meeting. And so at the beginning of every meeting, we go around and we talk about the conditions we face in the working class. This is part of the transition belt to help us, lead us on the way to make scientific socialist positions. How are you going to have that if you don't have the understanding of the working class? And that's what we provide here every day. I guess I'll start with myself. Like I've been saying, I've been going through this transition. I was over the road, and then I got local, and then I got this local company, and their health insurance sucks. So now I'm forced to go to a bigger local company. I also had to put my 2 weeks notice in. And you know what? Do they ever give us a 2 week notice when they fire us? No, they don't ever give us but we're supposed to put a 2 weeks notice, or that goes on our record somehow. And that's kind of messed up. I'm looking forward to my new job. I got one last week where I'm going to be back up. It's not going to be much. And I'm going to start a more labor intensive job coming up. As far as how people are going, I mean, people are suffering. A lot of people don't have. There actually was another round of stimulus checks, and in North Carolina, they gave checks to anybody with kids to support childcare or educational costs, and it was only like $300 and something. That's kind of a slap in the face. Like, because there's no public schools and they got that little extra money, they decided to give people stuff, so they gave them $300 in place of lost child care and having to come up with your own technology. Technology's not perfect. The computer, the internet. It's good they did it, but it's kind of a slap in the face at the same time. And a lot of people growing up nowadays, like back in the day, everybody would get legally married. Nowadays, people get together and they don't ever get married. And when people don't get married, they don't get the benefits of marriage. So a lot of people with the tax structure aren't getting the stimulus, or they're only getting part of it. That's a problem with what's going on. People are so broke, they don't even got the money to have a marriage no more. So they move in and cohabitate, and then they lose those things, those legal benefits that come with marriage. And that's I see that a lot in the working class community. Comrade David Fox, how are things looking over there in Australia?
Well, yeah, it's 2021. What a start what a start. Well, for Australia here at the moment, I think we're going to be looking up to some tough economic times ahead for a lot of working class people. There's still going to be a lot of job losses, I'm led to believe, a lot of what will further casualisation, part-time work. A lot more union struggles, though. Like I've explained in previous videos, legislation was tabled before, or proposed legislation was tabled before Christmas at the federal parliament. It basically just to erode workers' conditions even further, especially around further casualisation, the way to have outside bodies to be involved in internal union affairs, like AKA breaking up unions overall, which obviously it's been a very strong position from our point for a very long time, that there should never be any external interference in union affairs at all. That's strictly with the rank and file and the leadership, and they should be respected. The other thing as well, I mentioned job losses. I received a call during the week from a particular company. I won't mention the name, but they do make cans or tins for mainly powdered milk and condensed milk, etc., and baby formula. They're looking to do some layoffs even further. 3 years ago, they had massive redundancies there, and now they're looking to further redundancies, which will affect the town that's in. It's only a small town where this factory is, and that will have the long-term effects too on that community as well, which we've seen, especially in regional areas where you may have one employer or possibly two, but we all know what happens with job losses. That has a devastation on that town and that community. It wasn't the greatest news to receive at the start of the year. That was about middle of last week. So obviously we're dealing with that next week. I've got an organiser looking after that for me while I'm still here at the moment. So that's where it's certainly. This is just a taste of things to come for Australia as well. When we were promised all this big stimulus and this manufacturing and all, which we really want back here in Australia, obviously, but it's not looking like that at all. I think what we're going to be up against is a lot more austerity, a lot more increase in tax on working class people and workers' conditions and pay, etc. And I can also see a lot more foreclosures happening here in Australia as well with people's homes. They're not able to pay it off anymore. So you can see a lot more homeless working families, the working poor that traditionally been known for the last 10 years.
Right on. So in Australia, I just have a minor question. So did they do a foreclosure moratorium? And if they did a foreclosure moratorium, are they doing rent forgiveness or not doing rent forgiveness?
No, well, what they did there for a little while is just put everything on hold. You still had to pay off that debt. But you could be, a lot of people had job losses and they still had to then pay off all the rest of that mortgage. Some people... some places were actually trying to gain back. They say, all right, we'll hold off for X amount of months, you're paying it, but from that day onwards, we'll continue your payment, but you also got to back pay all that time you've lost as well. So there's been no actual genuine leadership or clamp down, but everything's put on hold at the moment. Any one debt will definitely cancel a certain amount of debt, and that will make life easy for working class people. It was never like that at all. Basically, we said, well, at the moment, we'll do this, but you've got to pay that back. And it's a similar thing too, because our gross domestic economy is it's close up to hit the $1 trillion in debt, and working class people will be paying off that as well. So anything for JobKeeper, which was for those who were on the potential of losing their jobs, business had to show they were losing so much amount in profit. Well, the government stepped in and paid them, topped up their wages for that to a particular time and that. But even that's all coming to an end now. And a lot of those companies now looking to lay off their workers at the same time. But we will have to, in the long term, pay all that back as well. So it's just basically all they've done, just put things on hold for the moment. And all that period of time, that gap when they're putting on hold, we've got to still pay for that as well, on top of everything else we've got to pay. So it's in Australia, capitalism is just going to spiral out of control here big time. It will just go into further and further crisis. So that's what we're looking up. I'm not trying to be Mr. Doom and Gloom here, but that's it's a very realistic picture what's happening here in Australia as well. There is no actual genuine progressive, not even a progressive step forward to get us out of this situation.
Mr. Mansfield, how are things out there in the Heartland?
Well, I guess it could be worse. I don't know how with the way 2020 went, but it always can be worse. But the thing, especially the issue in our area, in our little county, Greene County, we've got an industrial hog plant that employs significant number of people in this area, be it if they work on the plant directly or like my father or like I will be come the end of March, hauling hogs for the company. And, a small family farmer. I think most farmers in this area, right, we don't like industrial farming because it runs us out of business. But in this area specifically, it's an important thing to keep any sort of income coming into this area and keep us from getting poorer than we already are. But there was a big issue in 2020, and it seems to have died down a little bit, but it's still the threat. The corporate office had been firing people left and right. There had been whispers that they were going to shut down this branch. I mean, last I heard, there's about 40,000 head of hogs that move in and out of this place every day. 40,000. Yeah, no kidding, David. And they were threatening to shut it down. They had, in December, they fired, from what I heard, $10 million worth of employees. And at this branch alone, in our small little town, $10,000 worth of employees, people who had been at this company for 20, 30 years, gone in a heartbeat, gone without a 2 weeks notice. And what they did with this new $10,000 margin, they built solar panels. The company built $10 million worth of solar panels at their site location so they wouldn't have to pay for electricity from the county. Mm-hmm. But not only did they screw over God knows how many people, and they ain't done around here, they also have now basically cheated the county out of income from electricity so that they don't have to even pay utilities now with these terminated people's wages. It's god awful. It's killing off. You can't afford to farm hardly unless you were born into a family of farmers, which I fortunately 7 generations of farming in Illinois. You can't like you used to be able to. For example, my mother's grandfather came from a very poor family of 9, grew up in the Depression and the war and all this. Well, at 18, he moved out and he bought himself 100 acres, bank loan, worked, built a good farm for himself. You can't do that anymore. I couldn't at 18. I couldn't go out and go to the bank and say, all right, I need a loan of $40,000 to buy farmland to support the bank. No bank's going to give that to me. You can't anymore. And so this.
You just got to ask your dad for $1 million loan, no? Just a little $1 million loan. Yeah. Sorry about that. That was too good.
I think that's perhaps one of the things that country folk especially get so pissed off with politicians is when they say shit like that. It don't matter what you are, Democrat, Republican, but when you can brag about getting a loan from your parents of that much money, and we can't get a goddamn loan of $15,000 to make sure the banks or the corporations don't foreclose on us, that's bullshit. The American dream ain't alive and well. These corporations are killing it off. They're killing any hope of the everyday person being able to make an honest living for themselves. And what happens when people get poor? They have to turn to crime because that's the only opportunity they have to make money, to survive. And then the government will step in, they'll arrest you, get free labor out of you, and everything. It's just dust, and I know you know this, it's just the most vicious cycle you ever saw.
Right on. There's a lot to unpack there. That's a lot of knowledge to drop on us. Wow. and well summated and formulated. There's a few things I want to pick out of that. I think it's interesting how as communists and people that care about the working class, we care about the earth, and we want to be able to stay on this earth and be able to live. We got to fight climate change as much as other people. But if you look time and time and again, the liberal imperialist capitalists have used the environmental issue to try to shut down third world countries, to help corporate farms and help corporations get the hand over small governments, over small companies and small businesses. If you look in France, it was a regressive gas tax that started the Yellow Vest movement. That was just, I think that was just another example of how big corporations using environmentalism to beat down the working class. Go ahead.
It's so perfect. My party, the Party of Communists, released a pamphlet, and I have it right here, and it says "Socialist Planning or Environmental Collapse." And I think that is absolutely the best wording, because that's what it is, right? There is no limit to what we can do as humans, right? We are such a unique species that we've been able to develop society and civilization so much. The leeches aren't people, like a lot of these liberal environmentalist groups will say. The leeches, the destroyers of the world, are these select few big shots sitting behind a desk who will suck every mineral and resource out of this planet and then blame it on the little guy for not using metal straws instead of plastic ones. That's it. That's what it is. It's just downright lying. It's gaslighting. It's lying to the little guy, blaming him for the stuff that corporations are causing.
Right on. And I was going to mention, I'm out here in North Carolina. We got Smithfield. North Carolina is one of the biggest producers of hogs in the world. A lot of it gets sold to China, and they were hurting because of this big tariff war. Maybe you can talk about that. How is this China tariff war, this war with China that Trump has initiated, been for folks out there?
Dust, it's not a war. It's a goddamn massacre on American workers. That's what it comes down to. Grain prices absolutely plummeted, which means we can't sell the grain, so we got to store it. You lose, grain rots. You got moisture will get in there. Hell, we had a grain bin fire because we've had this grain sitting here for so long, and now with this over and with Biden coming back in, the markets are going up. So farmers were selling off as fast as they could, including us. Sold all the soybeans we had. Well, like what the anarchy of production, the markets keep going up, but nobody's got any beans left to sell. And so it's every day when you get grain price reports, it's an absolute slap in the face. It went up, and so we're like, okay, we got to unload this, even if we're taking a little bit of a loss, expecting it to plummet again. But it keeps going up, and it keeps going up, but nobody except Monsanto has grain to sell. So they're getting richer while everybody else is getting poorer, is what it comes down to.
Wow. That's a lot. So did you say you were going to be hauling hogs?
Yes, I turn 18 March 17th, take my CDL March 18th, and I have a load of hogs already scheduled March 18th.
Wow. Well, for folks without connections, most of us got to wait till we're 21 before we're allowed to get a CDL to go out of state.
Well,
it's really hard to find a local job.
How it works in Illinois is if you're a farm family, you can get a Class A license, which lets you haul within the state. So I hate to break it to you, Dust, we won't meet each other at a truck stop until I'm 21 because I can't haul out of state.
I got my CDL when I was 22, and that's beautiful, man. It will set you up. Regardless, hopefully whatever small business or whatever thing you got running there goes better, but it's always something good to hold back on. And any working folks trying to come up, I recommend getting a CDL. And that's a wonderful thing. And it's hard work, and it's a lot to learn. And you feel like when you apply yourself and you accomplish something, and that is a sense of pride and dignity that no one can take away from you. Like that, it's a very meaningful thing to have a trade. And it's glad to see young folks coming into one.
Exactly right. Well, that's the beauty, Dust, of, I think, in my opinion, of small farms and small, good, hardworking people, is you feel satisfied, you feel proud in your day's work, and you come home, you're tired. It's a good kind of tired. You're ready to have, like tonight, we had fried chicken and biscuits. You eat your dinner and you just relax. And it's a good feeling. And it's something that, just like we see with these high depression rates and so many people in the U.S., really, I think it's because a lot of people don't have anything to be proud of, nothing to feel pride in. They don't have the biggest part of their days at work, and work just makes them feel shitty, and it shouldn't. Work should make you feel good.
That's right.
That's a good way to go, man. All right, well, so we'll get into let me give a shout out to everybody who's in the comments. We got a few people watching us. If you are watching this, please get in the comments, say where you're from. We'll give you a shout out. We'll show your name up on the screen. Quick shout out to Radical, Robbie, Roy, McDoug, keep it up, Darth, Buddha, good friend of the show. And then we showed Ace Frank earlier. And it's always great to have another Students and Youth for New America member, Max the Sax. I got to have Max the Sax. If you're on here, give me an email at workingclassrevolt@gmail.com. If you want to come on and do an interview or co-host or come or play the Internationale on one of the Working Class Revolts, whatever you want to do. Send me an email at workingclassrevolt@gmail.com. And all right. Well, looks like we got Comrade Freaky. He's out there in Australia with Comrade Fox. All right, so we'll get right into the news section.
Just one thing, Comrade Freaky. Comrade Freaky, I sent you a message on one of your YouTube channels just in relation about doing a live interview. If you can actually email me that, I'll give you my email. It's davidfx69@gmail.com. Just if you can send me an email, that way I'll be able to communicate with you, and then I can send you the link and all that. We can link all that up and then sort out time and date, and plus get you on this show as well after.
Right on. So we're going to go into the news section, and man, it's been a very historical week. It's been a very long, historical, depressing but exciting in a bad way, kind of. I mean, it's been a historical week, and I'm just going to go into the summation from my point of view. People have heard this. I've been listening to several different analyses, and there's a bit of a divide on the left on how to see this. So I think I'll just go up with a quick summation of what happened on Wednesday. What happened on Wednesday, January the 6th, at the Capitol building. And essentially, Trump called out a Stop the Steal rally in support of him. He told everybody to come out. They got the permits. Now, how many people were there? I've heard from most of the mainstream media was saying several thousand. But the guys on the convo couch who were there at the thing covering on the ground were saying it was closer to 100,000. And the majority of the people that went to him were quote unquote peaceful. And it wasn't till near the end of it where Trump gave a speech, and then he said, meet me. He actually told them, meet me at the Capitol building. And then all the people going on the Capitol building, and then several hundred people. So it was a massive crowd, and then it was several hundred that broke off from that, and then they broke the police line. I mean, they were pepper gassed. They were spraying pepper gas at them. They were shoving them a little bit. They were also taking selfies with them and being nice to them at the same time. I mean, what's the difference between a pig and a fascist? I mean, they just got two different uniforms on. Not much different. And then they bumbled around and they went in there, and they didn't seem very professional. They didn't have an objective. They were sitting in people's offices. They got into Nancy Pelosi's office. They got into the chamber. And the chamber was was trying to ratify Biden as the president. And it actually held up the ratifying of the votes for some time. And then they came back later and they eventually swore him in the office. I mean, this is a huge historical event. I mean, that's a rough breakdown of what happened. I'm sure my comrades are going to help me with that. Let me go into a little bit of analysis on that. I mean, there's been huge divides in the left. The big divide in the left is one extreme position is everybody out there was a fascist and they should be killed, done away with, and censored. I don't think that's the correct position. And then on the other stream of that position is we should join right-wing groups and build up the right-wing movement, infiltrate it, and use it for the revolution. That is also not the correct perspective. I think it's a little bit of a mix of both. I think there is some real violent fascist danger that we have to deal with. If you look, there was an African American woman that was beat up by Trump supporters over in California. So I mean, people of oppressed nations, LGBTQ folks need to practice self-defense against some of these groups. And the other thing is the class analysis. A lot of people are saying, oh, it's just these petty bourgeois business owner tyrants. And I think when it comes to the people that showed up to rallies, I've been protesting, before I started driving trucks, 6 years of my life or more was nothing but I lived for going to protest for about 6 years of my life. And I noticed some interesting class dimensions when I went to protest. What I noticed was I did immigrants' rights, I did anti-war, and I also did the environmental issue. And what I noticed in the environmental issue, it's a lot of these technocrat, managerial type folks, these brunchers, these Hillary brunchers that go to a lot of these protests because they're the ones that can afford to go to the protest. Now, I saw a little bit more working class character in the immigrants' rights movement because a lot of these immigrants' rights movement had NGOs that were funded by Democrats, and they would get buses, and they bus in working class folks. Now, I'm not sure if they bust in working class folks. Most people can't afford to, on a Wednesday, to go to a protest. So, but I do think, but that kind of misleads people because just because a lot of the people there were these petty bourgeois folks, and a lot of Trump's base is petty bourgeois, you cannot say there is not a mass of working class people that support Trump. There is a mass of working class people, even proletarian people that support Trump. And some of it does have to do with racism, but some of it has to do with they really hate the Democrats that passed NAFTA and got rid of jobs and did all this other horrible neoliberal policies that's been horrible to the working class. People see Trump as kind of like taking on the establishment. He's a fake populist demagogue. And a lot of people, got emotional about that, got caught up in that. And I bet there was a few working class people that went there thinking they believed the lies, they believed the hype. And then Trump was like, go to the Capitol building. And then now they're facing years and years of prison. It's some rich bully demagogue that just fucked his own base over.
Yeah.
I mean, and a lot of people I live in a neighborhood where a lot of working class people back Trump. And a lot of them are disgusted with what they saw. And I think it's a good thing. I think Trump is on his way out. He's done. I think we do have to worry about these fascist thugs that aren't going to be going away under Biden. And I think we need to figure out a way to reach out to the my focus. I will work with anybody who is an anti-imperialist. I think we should try to convince as many people to join us as possible. My current focus is the proletariat, which is the working class. The American proletariat is not labor aristocracy, meaning it's the people who are super exploited. People of the oppressed nations, really poor people in the rural area. That's my primary emphasis. Now, whoever we can get outside of that, the better. And I believe socialism in general would help 99% of the people in the U.S. But that's a whole nother deep scientific socialist class analysis. And right now, I think we need to build as much workers' power as possible. Another thing I saw, you didn't see Antifa at the protest, which I think was a correct strategic move. Antifa was participating in self-defense. I think we need to emphasize coming out of this. I think the way forward is on the question of fascism. We need self-defense. We also need to reach working class people and win them over to socialism and reject fascism and promote anti-racism in our own communities. And then also, number one, we need to build community organizations. We need to build ideological organizations, and we have to get out of the protest cage, the liberal back, Democrat-controlled protest, synthetic left movement, and go to the masses of people, proletarian workers, people oppressed nations, rural folks, urban folks. And I'm also big. I did a good stream on the rural-urban divide. I think we need to cut down these stereotypes of proletarian folks in urban areas, believe in stereotypes about people in rural areas, and vice versa. We need to unite the working class to unite and fight. That's my brief presentation on that issue. David Fox, maybe you want to give your thoughts on these events?
Yeah, well, when there's all these events that are unfolding for us in Australia, what does actually mean? One of the big concerns we have coming out of all this, there will be further clampdown on all our own civil liberties. So I'm sure the powers that be certainly watching that very closely. And I'm certain that's something we should not ever wish for. By the way, either. I know they were kicking people off Twitter and Facebook and other things. I mean, sure, and some of these people are outright obnoxious. I understand where the left's divide, because some of these people are just outright obnoxious. They're just bad, they come out with that stuff, and it's just like, yeah, well, it's bad luck. Good, glad to get all your crap shut down. We don't want to know about it. But the fact is, it's not going to actually resolve anything, and I think capitalism is certainly not going to resolve this as well. I've been a couple of questions here. I'd also like actually for everyone to actually discuss about how did we get to this point in the first place, and also to also recognise there is. Sorry, I'll rephrase that. There is an underlying fascist element to in America, and so is here in Australia. It's not as big compared to probably the US, but still it can be deemed as a threat as well, and these forces can be utilised any time. I disagreed with the president-elect when he said this was an insurrection. It wasn't, because if it was an insurrection, you would have had tanks, army battalions, and you would have had jet fighter planes flying over Capitol Hill, and then the president in military fatigues, announcing, doing a radio broadcast, television broadcast from the White House that he's clamped down, martial law, everyone's locked in, and things off. So that would have been an insurrection or coup d'etat. But certainly something like that last week was just a riot in itself. I will say I did agree with some person's analysis that Trump is weak. He rebelled everyone up and then wasn't even with them. And there was 5 people that didn't have, that lost their lives, needlessly. It was just a waste of life. Now, I had to tend to agree with that, although I don't agree with their opinions and their views, and I think some of them are quite out there. But I mean, the fact is, at the end of the day, that was just, there was the leader. He didn't bother, sticking with these people. He decided, let them off they go, and just so it could boost his ego, and then let his ego get stroked even further for the next 10 days or so. And to me, that really is a rather low act, to be honest with you. But at the same time, I can understand those people. Well, we don't have any sympathy for them either. And look, I get that. I seriously do. I get that. But look, at the end of the day, what are the ramifications are going to be for general working class people for moving forward? An interesting point, because if it was a trade union demonstration, do it, or if it was organised by a respected communist or socialist party, or there was an anti-fascist rally, for example, Black Lives Matter, I could tell you what the authorities would have been out there in full gear, regulatory to cross down as well. People were trying to compare the two sides as well, or they just managed. No. We've seen out for the events of 2020 what the powers that be are like with the Black Lives Matter movement as well, through to the anti-fascist movements as well, and seeing how they clamped down very quickly there. But when it came down to this, there was very lightly security in that. And I was reading an article on RT this morning, and they mentioned something about lax security as well. Well, to me, that was deliberately laxed, and also too, it was rather repulsive. You see those security personnel and police having taking selfies with that general crowd, and shaking hands and all that, all with them. And it was good. I think part of it was deliberately done that way too, so in order to give the powers to be now in the US especially, but also around the world, here in Australia, UK, Canada, gives them the ability, well, let's clamp down further on civil liberty, especially on people like ourselves here. And that is a very big concern coming out of this as well. Trump's just going to go away. Oh, he's not going to quietly go away. He's certainly be around for a few more years, being annoying, but I don't see him making a big political comeback. But that's besides the point. Let's address what's going on here. And also too, this is a reflection of the systematic crisis of imperialism and capitalism as well. It's just further and further, its empire disintegrating basically, and basically the capitalist class had to disown Trump because he was basically close to verging, unconsciously or subconsciously exposing the whole system for what it really is. So they had to switch behind Biden very quickly to give him all the support to try and stabilise it, because the capitalisms or the imperialists know they're staring down the barrel of all sorts of guns. You got the environment, you got the economic crisis, you got war, everything else. They're looking at it. They know they're on the way out, and what we're seeing here now, it's like, oh, what do we do? All right, we'll get behind Trump and Harris now, and trying to stabilise the situation. But I can't see any stability happening for the next few years, to be honest with you.
Comrade Mansfield, what's your take on these recent events?
Well, I think what David said was really well put about specifically civil liberties, and I'll get into some of the other things. Just 2 days ago, I was appointed to be the chairman of PCUSA's Civil Liberties Commission. And so this is a big thing for our commission right now.
Just quickly, what is PCUSA?
PCUSA is the coolest goddamn party in the United States.
It's the coolest party around.
Go ahead.
It's not to toot my own horn, but it's the party of communists. We're about 6 years old. We split from the Communist Party, and we're a rapidly growing cadre party. And we have so many different great. I'm extremely involved. So many different great branches that work for the people above anything else. And what I'm involved with is the National Agriculture Commission. Some of you comrades may know Christopher Halale from Vermont, who ran for Congress, got 4,000 votes. He is the chairman of the National Ag Commission. He appointed me his co-chairman. So he and I work very closely together, as well as the Civil Liberties Commission. And what we're doing, and the thing for our next meeting is, right, we already know that Twitter and Facebook will shut down left-wing working class voices every day. We see accounts get good accounts get absolutely blasted by these companies. Caleb Maupin has talked about how he doesn't expect to be allowed on the platforms much longer. And so I think the way I look at this is perhaps not so much of the state now cracking down on civil liberties and the expression of our voices, but rather one section of the ruling class finally cracking down on these other sections. And so I see it as it's not necessarily as much a threat to us because we're already dealing with this. We already experienced so much censorship. It's more of for a minute, of course the state isn't going to allow this split to exist for much longer, but the state is starting to turn on itself. It's starting to really experience instability, and this is something that we can hold on to. Just like Dust, you were saying, this just absolute fanatical dedication to Trump, this almost like cult of personality, so much so that the middle class people will risk their life and give their life to storm the Capitol for what? A tea party? Nothing was stopped. Think about this dedication. This has been the question that's turned back on us. What demographic? Because the U.S., let's be honest, is majority either Democrat or Republican. What group should we have the most confidence in for revolutionary potential, or whatever you want to call it? The liberals who will, go to a protest and then come home and knit a pink hat and whine on Facebook, or this group that was willing, though misguided, a group that was willing to take action against a state that they saw falsely, at least in the way they saw it, as repressive. And running on the whole platform of should we, try to push Biden left? Should we try to commandeer the right-wing movement? When people ask me what my ideology is, more than likely I'll answer Republican. Connolly Republican, an Irish Republican, a traditional Republican. It's the old smoke and mirrors, Dust. Tell them, I support Irish Republic. And with, I support the People's Republic. And with that, grabbing onto these populist terms of how we should organize society, it's very easy. In reality, people like you, this program, Caleb Maupin, others, very accessible and digestible information for working class people, no matter what your background is. I've had friends and family who fly a Confederate flag, but are much more sympathetic to socialism because of shows like yours that I've recommended, or the CPI, the Center for Political Innovation. They become sympathetic because of the language and the rhetoric that we promote, right? We don't promote tearing down and destroying. We want to talk about building and how we can move forward. Pope Francis said that it is the socialists who now think and act like Christians, that walls will always fall, but bridges should be built. And I think this is the right kind of momentum that we need to get to people, because everyone sees that there's nobody. I mean, maybe liberals.
Oh, it's dropped out.
Hey, Mansfield, you're out. Okay. Let me message him on the Facebook and try to get him back up in here. I'm sorry about technical difficulty, comrades.
Well, we'll just wait for him to come back on board, just to actually mention about the censorship side of things. Look, powers that be can censor us anytime, kick us, close our accounts down, be it on Twitter, Reddit, Facebook, or whatever format you tend to use. They can use that anytime against us as well. So for those, I know there's been some discussion around we shouldn't champion shutting down pages or people's accounts and stuff. But at the same time, what we do is not going to have any effect on Twitter or Facebook's decision to shut down an account. They can do that to us anytime, or YouTube too, even in that matter. And yeah, I mean, that's got to be a concern, obviously. And oppression. Well, you're right, Brad. Certainly right about that. And it is a form of oppression. They'll be gladly to censor us one way or the other.
We need to nationalize telecommunications.
Yeah, so we can
good internet out in rural areas.
Yeah.
That's part. Maybe if you want, maybe let me do a shout out of the folks that are in the chat while we're waiting for Mansfield to come back on. Quick shout out to Emerald Thunder on Facebook. Interesting comment from Radical Robbie. PCUSA is the most sunglasses wearingest party. I know we're laughing, but big shout out to the comrades at Party for Communist USA. We're glad our comrades working with them. We're glad that people are getting ideology out to the masses. At various organizations.
Yeah.
And
a big shout out to Bradley William too. We'll give you a call later on, brother. We'll have a yarn. But it's also a big shout out to Papi. Is it Papi Shalom? Yep. Hello. And what's the other one? Dibis. Dibis. Did I pronounce that right? If I pronounce that incorrectly, I do apologise. Oh, Papi, that horrible photo. Oh, you change that picture, Papi. That's just no.
All right, he's trying to go back on it.
That's not right. No, don't do it.
You're talking about censorship. I think that's another divide. I'm seeing folks like on RCP saying, "Oh, it's wonderful that Trump's getting shut down," but on the other side, at the other time, it's like the dude, you know, he just like told all these people to rush this building. I mean, but they always use it against. They whatever infrastructure they have, the corporate. Now it's the corporate Silicon Valley fascist infrastructure.
Yeah, it's
not primarily used to shut down fascists. It's primarily used to shut down oppressed nations, socialists, communists, anarchists, and the left. It always has been. I mean, I remember seeing there was these. I remember that Facebook's been letting a lot of horrible shit go down for a long time. You know, you just look at those fascist cop groups that were talking about, like, they were talking about bragging about raping people, or talking about or posting like really insensitive pictures up and outright racist stuff within the U.S. police departments, Border Patrol. Like, this shit's been going on for a long time, and none of that shit gets shut down. But my friends over at Telehagwire, Ernesto, who we interviewed, if he wants a 1 million for the page of Aslan, they shut him down. He had his show up on there. He had his page up on there for years and years. Had thousands and thousands of people watching that. He just gets shut down at a drop of a hat. And these right-wing motherfuckers, they just let him keep going. It's almost like a slap on the wrist. Maybe this is a good discussion. You want to continue about censorship, David?
Yeah, well, it's interesting here in Australia because the last, say, 10 years, we had a lot of the rise of these far-right groups and they've had, obviously, a lot of these social media platforms, on Facebook and Twitter. Now, the amount of complaints that was put in about these groups to Facebook and Twitter, but basically Facebook did turn around and says, "Oh no, they don't infringe on our community standards and get these pages going." I think a lot of them have been shut down now over the course of the last 2 years, but especially when a lot of us were mobilising against these fascist groups. I think the fact is, at the end of the day, there's some real nasty, horrible stuff. And like correctly what you're saying, they're talking about killing people, exterminating people, putting people back on planes, send them or wherever back they come from. Real just nasty, horrible stuff. And it's interesting now, all of a sudden, out of all this, now Facebook and Twitter, and they're not just the only two, but there'd be other social media platforms are now considering shutting down their pages. And I thought, well, they had the opportunity over the last 10 years here in Australia to do so. The other thing as well is, like I was saying, they'll shut us down very quickly, or kick us off Facebook altogether, or suspend us from Facebook. I remember I put a post up there, I think it was about one of our former Prime Ministers, Tony Abbott. It was a complete town clown at the time, and just outright obnoxious. And I put something up there. I was banned from Facebook for 3 whole days. The fact is, I actually got, I had to accept the Facebook's values and rules and that. And I thought, well, actually, all I did was just tell the truth. And anyway, but I got shut down for it. So it's, well, look, it was, to me, it was a double standard. So in some aspect, good. Yeah, I'm glad some of this is thrown off. I was just going to jokingly say too, I wish they shut the Murdoch empire down as well. That I think the world would be a much better place without Murdoch around and his media platform. But anyway, that's just me having a dig at the Murdoch empire. But we're going back. I think it's always going to be a concern for us all on especially trying to put a working class message forward, especially all us involved in working class activities. I think in some aspects too, but it's a double-edged sword even for the powers that be. All right, fine, they're going to shut us down. But the fact is, how they're going to keep an eye on everybody as well, because they also tend to use that as a way to keep people on, keep an eye on everybody. And what actually, too, I think while we're just here on the use about social media, I've explained this in a couple of videos in the past as well. Just be careful of all the comrades out there and all the friends and that. Just be careful at times what you put up there, because that is regarded as publication. Now, what I'm saying is, for example, if you're trying to unionise your workplace, you might have to work a bit covert, and that you might even set up a secret Facebook group. There's plenty of closed Facebook group. Even if that's a discussion amongst yourselves and maybe a few other close people you're trying to unionise it, that is still regarded as publication, and by rights the company can actually order get that information from them in the future and use it against you. Same thing when I was organising Barrow Island, the big gas plant up there at the time, for a shorter roster campaign. It wasn't just me, there's many other organisers involved in that at the time. There was comments going up on social media about I won't mention the names of the multinational companies, but we just told people, look, just stop, don't do that, and let's do it properly through the official union channels, because the union pages, because then we can milk trade it, because you can actually, that'll be used against you. You'll probably lose your job. That will actually also leave you open to be sued as well, or as taken against. They can cripple us financially any time as well.
Hey, Fox, let me hide you for a minute. It looks like we got our comrade back. Sorry about the technical difficulties, everyone. All right, Mansfield, are you with us? Can you hear me? There we go. Looks like he's back. Is audio working? Hey, we can see you, brother, but
yeah, can you hear me? I'm sure I'm pretty lag.
Do you have a pair of headphones that might? Yeah, do you have a pair of headphones that might help with that echo?
Yeah, let's see. Actually, let me try to figure out where they might be at.
All right. It's glad to have you back. We were just talking about how the rural-urban divide, as far as telecommunications infrastructure, the capitalist system does not facilitate rural living. Because, I mean, let's talk about the post office. The post office gives universal service to everyone, regardless if they live in a rural area. And I believe that's the way we need to run telecommunications. We need universal service, which means even though it costs more to get out the rural areas, we should, as a society, provide for that. And if they were to privatize, he went away. If they were to privatize the post office, they might start giving old ladies medications out to rural areas. Might go from 50 cents to $1 to $14, $15 to deliver that. So we do need a nationalized telecommunications infrastructure that will give universal service to people living in rural areas. Yeah. I think that is a good socialist demand.
Well, it's interesting you mention it, because in Australia here, we used to have all that. We had the Australian telecommunication provider was Telecom, and it was privatised in the 90s. And what happened? First of all, it became corporatised. Instead of actually being a genuine service that our taxpayers' money funded, and people in the rural regional areas and remote areas as well benefited from. We had a really good service. In the 1990s, there was a lot of privatisations, and eventually Telecom got turned into Telstra. And now these days, because it's under private hands, and they still own a lot of the infrastructures as a private company, but the level of service has gone down. I could be on the road, I'll be having a conversation, not talking like this, obviously. When I say I have to go to a meeting up to wherever, and I'm just talking over the system and that, but then all of a sudden it just drops out. completely. And you go to some places, you think you'd have a signal, and you don't get that as
Hey,
well.
Comrade Mansfield, are you back on with us? Can you say something?
Yeah, can you hear me okay, Dust?
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
Comrade Fox, I'm gonna hide you
Are you
again.
able to hear me?
Okay. Boom, boom, boom. Okay, so where did we leave off, Mansfield? Where was the last thing you remember? We'll go back to where we were at.
I think last I was saying was just talking about how identifying with the political structures and building more consciousness within rural areas, right? Most rural areas, most Republicans, it's a predominantly Republican area.
Let me just. So we're back talking about the events on the 6th. Comrade Mansfield, maybe you want to give a little more of your opinions on that. I got you. I'm just letting everyone know we're still on the news section about the 6th. Go ahead.
With the 6th, I don't. With what happened on the 6th, I wouldn't. But like you said, it wasn't a revolution. It wasn't a riot. The Party of Communists, and I tend to agree with their analysis. It's much like the beer hall push that Hitler led. Right? It was a bunch of ragtag fanatics following a person, basically into a death march. Right? It was misled people from the predominantly middle class who put too much faith in an ideologue, into someone who really didn't care about them, and they suffered the consequences. Now, some people from this may realize what was wrong and realize that following Trump and that the Republican Party, even as a whole, does not care about them. But I think a lot more people, which is unfortunate, will double down on this, right? And they may go farther right. They may start blaming the failure on minorities, on Jews, on it's going to split this party even more. And I think we need to be ready to scoop in all the people we can who have become dissatisfied with the result of this mistake, of the order that this wannabe fascist, wannabe dictator has given them.
Right on. I think, there's been a lot of debate on the left. I think we're going to get better analysis as we go on. I've heard that. I actually don't know as much about that historical event, but it sounds like there was a lot of parallels. I think there's a danger with that as well. I think we need to take the fascist risk serious and be able to defend against it. But also there's this tendency to overemphasize it, like certain parties do. I usually say their names. Everybody knows who I'm talking about. They overemphasize this risk, focus on this risk, when the main enemy is imperialism, is the capitalist system. It is us being exploited every day. It's the ongoing wars. I mean, these fascist forces, at least at this time, it can change, are weak. At least now. I mean, that can change quickly. But at this point, the main enemy is the imperialist system that exploits more, kills more, and Biden is leading up to it. And it's this neoliberal imperialist system that is creating this fascism and uses these fascist elements in the time of crisis to stabilize it. Any further words on that, Comrade Mansfield?
I think and with time and how this plays out, and especially what's going to happen when we see on actual inauguration day of are these forces going to reassemble? What's the federal government? How is it going to respond? Are they going to have FBI sitting and waiting? Or is it, again, going to just be allowed to happen? I think we're going to get a lot more clarity in the coming weeks. And I think then is really when we should start making our analysis, when we have plenty of information and a bit of hindsight to go from there. But that's not to say that we shouldn't be ready with what we expect to happen in case it does.
Right on. Maybe we can get a dive. Before we leave this topic, I got a quick question. Should we be backing these? The Democrats are talking about doing an impeachment. Also, they were talking about some kind of amendment that could remove him from office. Should we back or support or join in street demonstrations pushing this? And my understanding is no. And the reason why I say no is a lot of that is just pushing illusions in the Democratic Party. I would prefer on the ground. A lot of the effort that's going into the protest cage, tailing behind the forces controlled by the Democratic Party, a lot of that energy can be put into building grassroots community defense groups and grassroots community power and labor groups. I would prefer that emphasis. Fox, what is your take on this situation?
Well, I tend to agree because trying to impeach a president, he's 10 days out. What's the date? Yeah, it's the 10th year in Australia today. So he's 10 days out finishing up. There's really no point because all they're going to do is just stir up the situation even further and it could backfire big time on the Democrats and all the liberal type political movement out there big time. And you're right, we shouldn't actually be tailing this. I think we need to actually build up our own strong organisations and connect with the masses. I think the big important thing, that is a very big important point. If we, especially to engage with all the working class people, be in the cities and the rural areas and that, engage them and win them back to the cause, to our cause again, not and so we don't allow actually the ability to play into the hands of the fascists as well. Will Trump have his rally on the 20th? Well, most likely. And look, to be honest with you, let him have it. Let him do it. Maybe it's actually good to go. We can analyse it too and have a little bit more sobering look at this. But I think it's just winding them up even further and giving the fascists ammunition to fire back. I think the best thing is to undermine them and deprive them of any ability to try and mobilise in the future. And I think that's got to be vitally important and educate people what these people are all about and what is fascism as well. It's like we've got to actually make sure we point out too, people just don't use that word lightly or divorce from what its actual meaning is.
Comrade Mansfield.
I agree with David. I think because I think we can learn a lot from history, especially our own working class history. What happened in the UK when Mosley was coming into power, right? When he was gaining popularity and he was holding these massive rallies. Well, socialists didn't push for the crown to silence him. No, instead they mobilized in mass. They protested his speeches. Hypothetically, historically, they beat the ever-living shit out of Mosley. They from a grassroots stance, stopped him. They didn't rely on the power of a state, right? Because these things are being enabled by the state, right? Police work for the state. This attack on the Capitol was not orchestrated, but 100% enabled by the state, because in many ways it reinforces a certain part of the ruling class's interest. And so the response that we should have is one of, Annie, get your fucking gun and let's go stop this bullshit before it kills working class people. Let's nip this from the bud. Let's stop this from a grassroots level, not from a top down. Like, we're going to trust the state to responsibly stop someone who supports imperialism. That's absolute nonsense.
Right on. We're already over an hour in. Probably won't go more than 2 hours. It was an interesting question here in the chat. I think probably a good way to end this discussion going forward. Here from, sorry if I pronounce your name wrong, brother, Saverio Faloni, class analysis. Next right-wing Bonapartist politician will be far worse and smarter than Trump, and then we'll be in real trouble. And I think like I was a supporter of the Green Party, and a lot of what Howie Hawken was saying, why he was running against Biden and Trump, was it was the Democrats who created neoliberal imperialist policies that created the conditions, the worsening conditions that created Trump. So we need to oppose the entire system and build a workers' party, or we're going to get someone like Trump. And I think there's a real danger. Maybe even Biden could go in a more authoritarian manner. If Biden doesn't last long, Kamala Harris could be pushed into do a repressive manner of the state, and then maybe even another right-wing demigod from the Republican Party, even as soon as 4 years from now. So I mean, how are we? I don't have all the answers. I think this is a real possibility. And what are we supposed to do about this? And I think my answer is stay the course. Spread revolutionary ideology, build working class power. In the fight for working class power, those are the schools for the revolution.
Yep.
Comrade Fox?
Yeah, well, look, I think you've summed that up quite well. Actually, I'm just reading Caleb's book on Kamala Harris. There at the moment. That's what I got in the mail last week. Finally, it arrived to Australia, and I think it's not going to be Trump. It's going to be next time around. There's going to be someone. There's going to be someone far more sinister, be it in the Democratic camp, be it in the Republican camp, or be it a new party, whatever. Someone else to come along, and how it's going to get there. Well, day at a time, really. I'll put it that way. I don't know, but certainly it's something to always be aware of. But as like one of the comrades in the comments said, we do need to be organised and be prepared. If the situation does eventuate, well, then we can deal with it then. Because I think it's just like, you're right, if we start mobilising now and ask for impeachment and everything else, I think that is a bad road to go down. Down far as I can. It's just stirring up trouble even further for ourselves.
Comrade Mansfield?
I think that's extremely well said, right? What happens in 4, in 8, in 12 years because the Republican Party is not going to screw this up. The ruling class, fascism is capitalism in decay. Really, by the time David, by the time I'm your age, the U.S. will be fascist or it will be socialist. That is the reality. And they're the ones who are going to decide that. What's going to happen in 3 and 4 cycles? They're not going to rerun an old semi-pop culture star. No, they're going to run someone who's young, someone who has actually good speaking skills, who can rally a crowd, someone who's attractive, and someone who is unapologetically fascist. Like, they're going to run a Nicholas Fuentes. They're going to run a Steven Crowder type. They will run someone who will not only get all of the Republicans on board or all of the conservatives, but will pull significant support from the liberals because liberals are so, in many cases, indistinguishable ideologically from Republicans. It's not hard to have a right-wing populist politician who's going to attract the majority of Republicans and a significant portion of liberals. That's not a possibility. That is inevitable if we don't do something about it.
Yeah.
Right on. So let's move on to our next news segment. Brother Fox, did you have a statement prepared about the recent events surrounding Julian Assange?
Certainly. For those of you obviously would have known early last week, there was a temporary reprieve for Julian in the sense where the US lost its extradition order for Julian from the UK to the US. It was a good shot in the arm, a slight reprieve, and then further on that week he did apply for bail. That bail was certainly thrown out. They did not allow him to apply for bail. Now his condition, his physical condition in Barwon Prison there. No, sorry, it's not Barwon Prison. The name will come back in a minute. he certainly is not. He's not in very good shape at all. He's still quite physically. He's not really good, and also his mental health. The reason why the extradition order was knocked on the head, they actually used the term because of his physical and mental well-being. There's not as an excuse not to have him extradited. Now, the thing is, this is what we've got to be aware of, because I believe the US authorities are appealing against that decision, and they will try and prove to the courts, the British court, that his mental and physical well-being will be looked after, and they will try and put a case up there. So then he's not out of the woods yet. What actually here from Australia, because those of you who might not know, he is an Australian citizen. Our government, both sides who have formed government, have been very complicit in all this. They've just basically given lip service to Julian, instead of actually being directly on the phone to the British Prime Minister or even to the US presidents at the time. Let him go. He's coming back and returning him to Australia. He hasn't done anything wrong at all. All he did is receive some information. He had it checked by the lawyers and then released it through WikiLeaks. That's what happened. But the fact is, the powers that be in the US did not like it, because it certainly exposed their imperial adventures overseas, and realised to show they're the bad guy in all this. And they tried covering up the whole lot. So they're going after Julian. They need to make the reason why they're going after Julian is not because he exposed more than just what he exposed him. They want to use him as an example for anyone else that's willing to do investigative journalism, or anyone else that asks questions. Well, we're going to use him as a prime example. This is what's going to happen to you if you dare question, speak out, or receive that information. How dare you question our ability to be involved in the imperial plunder, which is exactly what Julian was exposing here. And it wasn't just him, it was the whole WikiLeaks website. Now, back is in Australia here, as I said, the current Prime Minister, Scott Morrison, he's only touched on a very light service. There has been two prominent politicians, one interesting Conservative, the National Party. Remember, Chris Christensen has spoken out about in favour of bringing Julian Assange back home, but also an independent, Andrew Wilkie. Interesting, Andrew Wilkie's background, he actually worked for ASIO, which is our secret service, or similar equivalent to CIA, and ASIC, etc. And he was appalled about what happened about Iraq in the early 2000s, with Howard lying in Parliament about weapons of mass destruction. John Howard was then our Prime Minister, lying to the public when the intelligence community actually explained that there is no evidence of weapons of mass production or weapons of mass destruction. There's no need for Australia to be involved. So he obviously voted on his consciousness, left and ran in politics from then on afterwards. But he's spoken out in favour big time of Julian Assange, and actually really exposed the treatment he is copped under the British system at the moment. What's actually I find laughable at the moment, well, it's actually not really laughable how they say the British justice system is one of the highest excellent systems in the whole entire world. I don't think so. They've got quite a long history of of really persecuting a lot of people, and they've got a whole, going back for the last few hundred years at least. Pardon me. So it is a concern about that. Our government's been complicit about this, and not actually doing their bit to actually bring him back home here to Australia. It's actually a relief. It was actually quite a relief that the Mexican government is offering him exile, live in Mexico. I think good on them for doing that. At least it shows you there are other countries around the world that are prepared to stand up to this and stand up for people like Julian and say, well, look, you're most welcome in our country. I think the thing is now is we're going to get a campaign a lot stronger to get that pressure and to have him released and let him get on with his life, because as I said, if he's locked up, this just sets the precedent, and he's used as an example. Well, it could be anyone next now from there on that can be easily arrested and then extradited to the US or to another country that they can then persecute. Because I think in the US he's up to 175 years in jail, which is life sentence, never to be released. So I mean, it's and for
did David just freeze? Mansfield, you still with us? Okay, you're back. Go ahead.
Yeah. So So that's it certainly is a very big concern. So look, it warrants everyone's support here. I think it's something we can also actually get out amongst the masses and explain what's going on here as well, because it can be anyone. You don't have to be a reporter or investigative journalist. It could be anyone.
I just want to get at it. How, Comrade David Fox, how do you feel as an Australian about your fellow countrymen being held in jail in England with basically no chance to release, and maybe even being extradited to the United States because there's appeal on this? How do you feel about your countrymen being held by the British and potentially the United States? And how do you feel about your government's response to it?
I'm actually, I'm disgusted, obviously too, especially towards our own government for doing jack shit. Sorry to use that, but doing sweet FA in their house to try and get him back here as well. I'm also, I'm disgusted with the British government. They know full well this is political. They're trying to get away and find all these little technicalities to keep him there. And also disgusted, why don't they just release him bail? Because the only reason why you would keep someone in prison if they're a physical threat to the community. He is not whatsoever a physical threat to people like you and I or anyone in the community at all. He wouldn't harm a fly, basically. And but this is just an excuse to show how dare you question the system. And we should be disgusted. We actually should be horrified, and we should be angry and being organised about this. This is how dare they do it? And because the whole system is there, they're trying to not just by covering up, they're just basically stopping us to even just question the whole right of the existence of imperialism here. And it's also disgusting that the powers that be in the US know full well he hasn't done anything wrong. When you hear commentators saying he should be shot, killed, even politicians, Democrat, Republican, they're insisting he should get the death penalty. I mean, that's a cause of concern. And I think everyone, and Brad's right, it's quite disturbing. The government has failed in its ability to do the right thing. And I think as us, all of us here in Australia, we should be in a massive uproar, but also everyone in the US and the UK as well should be in a massive uproar. I'm glad there are good people out there speaking out. John Pilger, George Galloway, many other good quality people, and I'm sure there's a lot of good quality people in the US speaking out as well. But has to be a lot more involvement and mobilisation.
Right on. I just want to give a quick shout out to somebody who's got a bigger page than me. Doesn't need the endorsement, but Comrade Richard Manhurst has been doing great coverage on Julian Assange. And it's interesting to note, I think a part of the reason why he's doing such great coverage on it is because he's a Syrian refugee living in Europe. And you got to see what Julian Assange did for the anti-imperialist cause, for the cause of truth and justice and peace, was expose one of the most brutal, exploitative, destructive, murderous empires in human history. Imperialism led by U.S. imperialism. And you can see that it's imperialism led by U.S. imperialism as the way the governments of Australia, the European Union, and the British kowtow, whatever the fuck the United States says on this, just the way they kowtow to this cabal of interest and Wall Street and London. That is the power that's controlling the world. That is the world dynamic. Yeah. And you can understand why a Syrian refugee would see Julian Assange as absolute hero that he is, and showing and caring for his mental state. This guy his last I don't know how many decades, like basically the last decade or two, this man has been being tortured. First kept in an embassy. Now he's in jail, solitary confinement. Yeah. This is the reason why they said he couldn't go over being expedited or whatever the hell over to the United States was because if he did, he's probably going to kill himself. And that's another thing. Yeah. So they did it for health. It was kind of a way out. The British government found a way out. They found a way to not get the negative publicity by not extraditing him. But They held up all the lies of the U.S., of the criminal system, of the police state. They basically said he's guilty of everything.
Yep.
The British court said he's guilty of everything, but because he has health issues, we're not going to send him. So this is, even though this is a victory for Julian Assange as an individual, this is horrible precedent for journalism, for human rights, for all of that. And I mean, I love Julian Assange, Bradley Manning, or Chelsea Manning, my bad, will go down in history as the heroes that they are, standing against the greatest evil humanity has ever faced.
That's right.
Comrade Mansfield.
Well, you know, I'm not very up to date on the Assange trial, but I know he's a name I've heard for ever since I became involved in these sort of anti-imperialist politics. And David, I think that the fact that the British government is prosecuting an Australian citizen is that not just a modern example of imperialism, right? Does that not show that the British government still, in all practicality, is ruling Australia as a colony and making its decisions, and working? The U.S. and the UK are operating still as basically colonial powers of getting to boss the world around, you know? And we hear the narrative of, well, evil, they've got to be stopped, and all these things, but they're very easy to break down, even without presenting, you know, even the actual data of what's really going on, of just, well, put yourself in their perspective, right? What happens if the U.S. wasn't the global power it is, and instead Saudi Arabia was the global police, and Saudi Arabia decided that the U.S. is the bad guys, the U.S. needs to be bombed, it needs to be occupied. You wouldn't like that. As an American, you would not like being under foreign occupation. And so take a bit of compassion for yourself. The Syrians don't like being under the threat of occupation. The Koreans don't like being under. We're united internationally by everyone has a right to self-determination, and the imperialist powers are willing to sacrifice. Not willing, they sacrifice the rights of people for money. That's what it comes down to. Yep.
And just on that, I mean, like Australia's relation with the UK and America, I mean, basically, they still look like, especially the UK, but even in America, I mean, they just look like us as a big quarry or a big mine or a big farm. That's about it. And trying to get raw resources and get their hands on raw resources at a very cheap price. And that's how they see it, and basically that's how they've been treated. Actually, the interesting I won't go into today about the history of Australia, but the ironic thing, the 1st of January this year, 2021, we were 100 years of a federated, we'll mark the 100th anniversary of the federated nation. Now, when we have a look at it, but when we federated, it was basically there to administer British capital and to stop the various states and then state colonies putting tariffs on goods moving across borders, etc. So it was that's what it's there for. We still had to actually get permission for a lot from Britain. I mean, it took another 20 years to actually get permission from the Privy Council to actually have our own steel manufacturing. That's just our thing. And our national anthem was God Save the Queen right up to the early 70s. When the Whitlam government brought in Advance Australia Fair, and then the Fraser government that came in after, we referred it back to God Save the Queen until Bob Hawke became Prime Minister again. So, and we're all still known as British subjects for many years. But it was actually World War II was the turning point that we turned to the US, and of course then the US became the leading power. We were actually ordered under US command. Now in the Pacific, the military, our military as well, it all comes under the Pacific Allies, whatever you want to call it. What's happened, but the US is the supreme leader, basically. All our military and everything else is garnered into the US military machine and into US foreign policy. Basically, Australia can't just do whatever it likes to overseas. It needs to have Washington's approval. If Washington says, yeah, no worries, go ahead and do it. And that's what, go ahead and do it. So, and even when every time we have a federal election over here, they're talking about foreign intervention from China. Bit of a laugh about that, because I think, well, the US imperialists have intervened in our affairs for ever since when John Curtin, probably our greatest prime minister we ever had, John Curtin, he was equivalent to your Roosevelt, was basically blackmailed and told by American authorities because he wanted to steer Australia on its own independent and develop its own independent course. And they said, no, you're not doing that. And threatened him about that as well. He died in office just coming at the end of when war in the Pacific, and then it finished at the end of World War II there. So, that's just was one of many examples, and that's what we looked at. I mean, when we're talking about trying our own independent course and that, it really would have to break the ties, and it will take a concerted effort by the Australian people to do so as well, to actually steer it in. We're not generally that independent. As I said, once a Prime Minister is elected or re-elected into Parliament, he'll get the call from the US, direct line to the US consulate here, get the orders, this is what you'll be doing, don't you dare threaten our interests, blah, blah, blah. And off you go. And also you're going to be our little lapdog, for our pivot into Asia as well.
Right on. That's great stuff. I recommend folks, if they want to know more about the labor struggle, the union struggle in Australia, or Australian history, please subscribe to David Fox's YouTube channel. Great lives that he does. Comrades, please subscribe. I think you're making a good point. And this is I mean, the two contradictions in the imperialist system that Stalin talked about in Foundations of Leninism, I think it was like the first chapter. He said the three contradictions: labor and capital, oppressed nations and oppressor nations, and the contradiction amongst the imperialists. Now, I'm always focusing on those first two. And I think David brings up a very good instance in the current time period, a good scientific socialist analysis of the contradiction amongst the imperialists. And from my understanding, what David is trying to do is use working class anti-imperialism to push Australia in an anti-imperialist direction, to unite with the anti-imperialists for the national interest of Australia against the interest of the bloc being led by the United States and England, or the UK. And that's powerful. That's cutting edge. I mean, you're not going to hear that anywhere else. No. You're not going to hear that I haven't found anyone analyzing that except my comrade David Fox and us here every week. Usually 8 p.m. Saturdays on Working Class Revolt. Shout out Parker Kerr. Okay, so we're going to move into the interview portion with our guest co-host, honored co-host Keaten Mansfield. So I just want to, brother Mansfield, I just want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for coming on today and taking your time and being with us. So I guess I'll get into the first question.
I love being here.
well, thank you. Okay, I can barely read I used to start typing up my notes, but I didn't prepare quick enough. All right, here we go. There we go. Okay, so you mentioned earlier you were on an agricultural commission, and is that within Party Communist Party of Communist USA?
Yes.
Maybe you talk a little bit more about that commission.
It is, yeah.
That whole struggle.
Yeah, of course. So the Party of Communists, for a little bit of context, has several commissions. We have Women for Racial and Economic Equality. We have the Civil Liberties, LGBT, Oppressed Nationalities, and recently, within the past 4 months, we have launched or beginning to launch the National Agriculture Commission, which is headed by Comrade Chris Halale, and then co-chair myself. And what the goal of our commission is to reach and kind of pseudo-unionize, so to say, as many farmers and rural people, ranchers, and even truckers, which is something that I've been pushing for to incorporate them in as possible. And so I have here the first statement that I've for the commission. It's being, I guess, kind of for anyone watching or listening, this is a pre-release of the very first official statement that we're ushering. I'll go ahead and read that if you'd like, Dust.
Yeah,
So
go ahead.
fellow farmers, ranchers, and rural residents, we live in a very different life from the rest of our fellow men. Our culture, our needs, and our survival is unique. It always has been. We, unlike those who work in factories and the stores, work without the benefits won by unionized labor. We have not been awarded oversight from the state to protect our working conditions, and we do not have set hours. We do not have guaranteed wages. We are the backbone of society itself, yet we are left to defend and fight for our own survival. Every day, we see our fellow ranchers forced out of business by the industrial giants like Tyson. Family farms are foreclosed by banks, the very same banks that the government shells out billions of dollars to keep afloat. Liberals will portray rural areas as backward hellscapes, scattered masses of uneducated hicks, and other classist narratives. We know this is not true. We, as country folk, have a rich history of class struggle. We can look around us and see the failures of this economic system. In 2010, $161 billion worth of food was thrown away. That's nearly 133 pounds. And yet 3.5 million of our fellow Americans don't know where their next meal is coming from. Is this what we want? Do we want the food that we produce thrown to waste while our brothers and sisters starve just to keep corporate profits up? Time and time again, we, as those who both own the land and work it, are left to shoulder the costs of a failed season. Top-down organization drives family farms deeper and deeper into debt, leaving one person to carry all the weight until finally they break. Suicide among farmers is on a steady rise, and it's no surprise. It's nearly impossible to go a day without something breaking down. And on top of this, with unlucky seasons, poor yields, and the looming threat of foreclosure, we are put under an insane amount of stress. Our best chance for survival is not to compete against each other while Monsanto takes control of small farms and banks foreclose on ranches, but to work together in solidarity and cooperation with each other and with our communities. This, dear friends, is what we fight for. We must organize and cooperate. It is our only way to survive until the economy is reorganized to serve the people, not profits. In solidarity, Keaten Mansfield, co-chairman.
Now that was beautiful, comrade. Wow. I just came up with a question while I was listening to it, and this might be a little bit of a pivot, but maybe I could talk a bit about my student solidarity organizing, student solidarity and immigrants' rights organizing that I used to do. There's an organization in North Carolina called Farm Labor Organizing Committee. And this is basically the people that organize the tobacco workers. And there was an interesting workers strategy they had. They've been on the forefront of innovating the labor movement because these are people on visas. A lot of agricultural workers are on visas. They're migrants. They're documented, undocumented. And what they did was, working with the tobacco companies, the farm workers united with the Growers Association to push big tobacco to pay both the growers more and the agricultural workers more in their union struggle. And I thought that was a great show of solidarity. Maybe you can talk a little bit more about your relationship with agricultural workers.
Yeah, of course. We that's a really good thing, Dust. We our Ag Commission. One of the things that I personally, as well as of course the chairman, both of us want to see price parity, and this is a very similar thing. For those of you who aren't aware of what price parity is, it dates back every bit to ancient Rome, maybe even earlier, and it was a concept that President Roosevelt, his administration, threw around, and then later would reemerge under Kennedy very briefly. And the basic concept of price parity is that instead of selling to producers or to consumers directly, instead of selling to Tyson directly, do very similar to what India had done after their decolonial movement. Sell to the government. So we have a set grain price. We sell to the government. Obviously, it would be higher than what the market is going to give us now. We sell directly to the government, which ensures that farmers are getting a good, fair, honest price, and in turn, the government then has the pleasure of getting to deal with these massive agribusiness companies, which would, for one thing, in reality, it would be an absolute pain in the ass to Tyson and Monsanto. It would help rural families and rural communities, and it would be a beginning start to see individual socialist policy, not system-wide, but individual policy that could then translate into building a wider and broader socialist movement until the entire point of the entire economy is reorganized as a socialist economy, right? Tyson and Monsanto be nationalized, which is something that needs to be done. If Tyson and Monsanto are going to continue to grow and continue to exist, they have to be owned by the government, because they can't be trusted on their own. In reality, no private, no market profit driven company can be trusted on its own. But specifically when it comes to food, the most vital resource we have, there is no margin for error or deceit or greed, in my opinion.
Yeah. Right on. I think I came up with another question while I'm listening to you. Probably we could have gone over this in the labor update, but I saw on Facebook you posted a picture of yourself. Were you driving a harvester? I think there's a little bit of a delay, but I believe I saw you driving a harvester. Maybe you can go in to, I know they do this similar with managers with salary work. Like, so you're hopefully getting a big payoff at the end of the day. The terms of the market are controlled by these big agricultural companies, banking firms, and heavy industry, the tractor industry, and et cetera. So you're essentially, you might be considered lower petty bourgeoisie on a scientific notion, but I mean, a lot of times you guys, if you're not doing so well, are worse off than company workers without the protections. Maybe you could talk a little bit about this day-to-day struggle and these fears and concerns that you have. Like, what time you got to get up, how many hours you got to work, the nature of the work, and the fears you have is working in the agricultural sector.
For sure it does. And just like we said in the release, and I said that though technically bourgeois, technically farmers are capitalists. In practicality, we don't experience capitalism. With agribusiness, we're essentially experiencing feudalism, right? Feudalism with an ice cream cone, because we don't have organized labor. We don't have set labor laws. We don't have regulations on the hours we've got to work. There can be days where I'll be up at 6 o'clock in the morning, and we're running from 6 until 10 p.m. at night, come home, have dinner, and by midnight, I'm back out in the field. That's happened so many times. And I'm out in the field from 12:30 in the morning until 4 o'clock in the morning. I get 2 hours of sleep, and then we're right back at it at 6 o'clock. And this is a regular thing for so many farmers. Not so many, for every farmer. It's the only way to survive. You can't work 9 to 5 and be a farmer.
Yeah. I think so. I just want to raise, and Brad Williams actually raised some interesting points here in Australia, because there's a lot of similarities. It's happening to you guys over here, and it's happening to rural workers and farmers here in Australia as well. The other two big dominants, what role do the supermarkets play in the US? Because here in Australia, the prominent supermarkets, Coles, Myer, and then Woolworths, they pretty much dictate the price to the farmers, how much they should be selling their product to the supermarket shelves. So be it fresh produce, tomatoes, capsicum, celery, you name it, all from dairy products such as milk. So I just wanted to find out, do the supermarkets play a big role in that as well, dictating the terms and conditions and prices to farmers and rural workers there in the US as well?
Absolutely, David. Absolutely. The concept, especially, I mean, everywhere, but specifically where I'm familiar, of the free market does not exist, right? The capital, the U.S. has central planning, right? Corporations use central planning. What do you think marketing departments are for? They look at the trends, they analyze them, and they say, okay, how can we manipulate the market that's going to bring us the most profit? And as we know, more profit for a company means less profit, less money, lower wages for the individual. So when Tyson and like Walmart, Whole Foods, Ruler, they work together, they decide, their marketing departments decide how the market is going to change, what kind of trend it's going to follow. We have no idea. We have no idea if tomorrow, because, and this is the scary thing, you go to bed, I go to bed thinking, am I going to wake up tomorrow and bean prices are going to go from $1.25 a bushel to 8 cents? Because that can happen. That is a real possibility, right? If there is some sort of international scandal or any sort of political instability, then we can wake up tomorrow and grain suddenly goes from being worth a fair price to jack shit, and it makes no sense because nothing changed fundamentally about that 3,000 bushels that you had sitting in a grain bin. There's not damage done to it. It's not been infested. It's not molded. It's not rotted. It is literally perception. The value of us as people, as farmers, our value is literally reliant on the perception and the mood of these major agribusinesses. And that is an absolutely disgusting way to live and to organize society.
Yep.
Just a quick, maybe 1 or 2 lines. How should society be organized?
Very simple. If people need food, there's more than enough food to feed them. If people need jobs, there's more than enough jobs producing food that need to be filled. Very simple. Companies, the market clearly isn't working, so it's time to nationalize these industries and get people the resources they need. Plain and simple.
Nice. Well put and very concise. I think let's move on to the next section of this interview. You talked a little bit about your role in Communist Party. It's a Party of Communist USA. Great comrades. People can check out that site. First of all, before we move on to the next subject, if people want to get in touch with Party of Communist USA, what is the best way of doing that?
The best way is to go to our website, which I believe is Party of Communists USA, and just search that, and we should be the first result. Go on our page and give your phone number, and within 3 days, the general secretary, the head honcho of our organization, will call you, and you'll speak to our leadership directly, and get a guidance and be able to talk and really get a feel for our group. A lot of really great people. I urge everyone who isn't already affiliated or working with us to do that.
Right on. So I was also going to talk about another organization you're working with. Can you tell us a little bit more about your role with Students and Youth for a New America?
Well, my involvement with Students and Youth is fairly new. Will be opening or founding a branch in my county for our school district in the coming weeks as we get approval from the board and things like this. I have, as of today, been elected national secretary of Sinai, and we're looking forward. I'm going to be completely honest with you. we are not a large organization. We don't have delusions that we're some sort of vanguard party. We aren't, right? We're a small grassroots movement of genuine working students and people that want to see the best for not only our country, but for the world as a whole. And so we urge anyone who's young and interested in the kind of politics that Dust and David and myself express to contact us. We're on Facebook. You can search us on Google to contact us and to speak. You can feel free to contact me directly. My email is comrademansfield@gmail.com. I can give you some guidance. On Twitter as well, Keaten Mansfield. My name is what I am for all my social media. So contact me if you're interested, and we'll get you on the path to joining us.
What was it? It was a few weeks back. You actually did a job that I did at the first webinar or web conference for Center for Political Innovation. You were the chair at that conference. How was that? And maybe you could tell us a little bit more about how the students and youth for New America work.
It was really an amazing experience.
Right, and how does Students and Youth for New America relate?
Absolutely amazing experience. I apologize for the lag on my end.
Yeah. I was saying, how does Students and Youth for New America?
Students and Youth for New America is not technically a part of
API. Mm-hmm. Go ahead.
Technically the two organizations are separate. We work very closely with each other. Sinai is in practicality very much a youth wing of CPI. We have many individuals who work with both organizations, and we have very similar political goals and expression. And so the two organizations are extremely compatible and work together very well.
I think I went into detail on that first interview. If you want to go back and check out my interview with Keaten Mansfield on my channel, if they want to check out that interview, then go back and see that. And I think we addressed this in more detail there. But maybe you can talk just briefly on the concept of New America and also the slogan, out of the movement and to the masses.
Yeah, of course. So, and that I was obviously for the building a new America, which is it's very simple. We want major corporations, these super capitalists. We want their industries nationalized. Small businesses, small farms can be left up to families and communities to run democratically as a whole in the interest of society. We don't think that markets should dictate what things and what people are worth. We think it's very clear what's worth what resources need to be where. And instead of relying on this mythological free hand of the market, we should rely on the voice of the people to determine where we want resources and where we want our labor to go. It's a very simple concept. There's no complex theory behind it. It's reviving the American dream in a way that helps everyone be lifted up.
Very good.
All right, probably the last question. How does this question of a new America relate to the larger anti-imperialist global movement?
A new America involves one of the biggest things myself personally and all these organizations is bringing jobs back to the U.S. because part of imperialism, right, is outsourcing labor to the third world to be able to control it and to have to pay lower wages. And so one of the most important things about a new America is creating one that no longer relies on imperialism or uses imperialism, and one that no longer relies on a colonial status with oppressed nationalities to function. An America that is self-sufficient, where every worker in America, regardless of race, gender, orientation, beliefs, has a job, has a house, and has food and opportunity, and one that where instead when our new America goes to a developing country and offers to help that nation, instead of it really being a ploy to take that nation's resources, but rather be a genuine form of aid, of building up with the abundance of resources that are in the U.S. to take the surplus, the extra resources in the U.S. and to give that to the countries and the nations that need the help, that can use these resources so everyone can experience the level of living that the select few, the billionaires in the U.S. are already experiencing.
Very good. That's inspirational stuff, actually. Just to make a comment like that, because I've been talking to a number of comrades here in Australia about that. We talk about, well, rebuild Australia or building a new Australia as well. It's something very similar, and a lot of working class people feel dear to their heart, and that to me would be actually an excellent starting point. And I think for all the comrades listening in, and everyone else generally who give a shit, listening into this is a good starting point, what we can do moving forward in all our respective countries, and that because we've seen a lot of jobs outsourced overseas, having masses of unemployment here and everything else. And the thing is, for Australia, it's basically exposed us. We're primarily dependent on imports all the time, you know. So if something, and we're an island nation, so if or a continental island, whatever you want to call it, but that, and we dependent on shipping. If something goes down on the seas, Australia comes to a grinding halt pretty much. So good.
Comrade Fox, do you got any further questions for our guest?
Well, I'm actually just on that. It'd be good actually. Are you actually able to provide further information for, especially for those of us here in Australia, because this is inspirational stuff, and certainly that's something where we can start from and formulate our own course.
Of course, you know, I'm 17, and there is it doesn't matter who you are. Anyone can see a new future for the world. Go to the people, talk to the people, and figure out what they want. Talk to the people who are being most disenfranchised by the way that our governments are ran, and ask them how they want to see things changed. Right? Most people have a natural and instinctive love for each other, even on a national and international level. And the best way to reach people is not by preaching about, oh, well, we'll burn the evil Australian government to the ground. No, that just alienates the majority of people. The way to, I would think, to approach that is, well, we'll make an American government that works for people. And that is really the baseline you need. And from there, you can build a movement. You can tweak and make your conditions specific and your analysis specific to your conditions. But the baseline of having a government that works for society and people, you're going to get every member of society on board with you.
Very good. Very good. Thank you.
I think we're discussing some amongst the left, some of these ideas. I mean, these are complicated issues, and people get up in flames, and some of this stuff's a little bit divisive. What I can recommend for comrades that are looking at this and trying to call us Nosballs and all this bullshit, what I can say is go back and watch the video I did called Hillbilly Revolutionaries, and I read the interview about the leader of the Young Patriots. The Young Patriots was an organization that was in the original Rainbow Coalition, which was a coalition with the Black Panther Party in the late 60s and early 70s. And they were called the Young Patriots. And they appealed to people's patriotism, at the same time standing in direct solidarity side by side with our oppressed nation brothers and sisters in the Puerto Rican movement and in the Afro-American struggle. And this is working class solidarity. This is what appeals to the working class. So there can be an appeal to patriotism that is shoulder to shoulder and side by side with the oppressed nations. And any new America for me would be an America that immediately ends the exploitation of the oppressed nations, immediately ends it. There is no hope in imperialism for the working class. There's no hope for farmers in the system of imperialism anymore. The system of imperialism needs to be done, and we need to have full comrades and stable, positive relationships with the rest of the world, and a system of win-win trade that builds up the people and doesn't tear people down and exploit them. Any response to that, comrades?
Well, I think it's good you actually raised that point. I mean, it's like I think a lot of working class people, young and old, are concerned about the future and the direction of the country. And workers I talk to give a damn. You know, they actually care about where we fought. And the stuff we've raised today actually would resonate with them loud and clearly. They go, yeah, hell yeah, we need to actually get control of our matters here, and steer our own independent course as well. And sorry to use the term independent, but yeah, just our own direction here, instead of just relying on someone happening to come and be the knight in shining armor coming along to save the day. That's got to happen. It's got to get back to our own collective selves again, and how we can move forward. It's some really good points raised out. This is inspirational.
Comrade Mansfield.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. Right. I grew up. My brother was in the Marine Corps. He was involved in Operation Iraqi quote unquote freedom. So I grew up with a strong sense of patriotism, and one of the things that I've gotten older starting to realize is this. We should tap into this strong sense of patriotism when it is appropriate, right? To say, well, yes, communists are really the only ones who support the troops because we're the only ones who don't want the troops dying in wars for profit. And this is the narrative that we need to support, right? When my brother came back from the Marines, his life is still, that was nearly 20 years ago, and his life has been all but destroyed by this. By doing this, and by our government's failure to take care of these people that they claim to care so much about the troops and so much about the American working class, but when you're sending 17 and 18-year-olds off to die in far-flung corners of the world for money, and when you're not, our jobs aren't stolen. American jobs haven't been stolen by immigrants. American jobs have been sold off to the highest bidder by capitalists, right? Our jobs have been sold off. They haven't been stolen, and we should blame the people who sold our jobs, not the poor saps who had to take these now shitty jobs in the third world just to survive. We're so easily blaming the wrong people in these scenarios.
Yes. Very good.
Right on. I think we've been going on about an hour. We're coming up on an hour and 50 minutes, I believe. Maybe we got another quick 20, 30 minutes or less. Let's move into our next section. And our next section is exactly how to do what we've been talking about. How do you talk to working class liberals? How do you talk to working class conservatives? How do you do that? So here's our workshop on building up your talking points, finding your voice. This is our how to talk to a worker workshop. Maybe I'll come up with a different name pretty soon, but I believe David Fox has the honor of grilling me today. We're not going to put the pressure on our honored co-host. David Fox is gonna pretend to be a misinformed worker from a various perspective, and then I'm gonna respond to it. Comrade Fox, if you want to go ahead and share the session.
Certainly, and I won't need to. This is actually a very good workshop because for those comrades and friends and fellow workers that are watching this is good. This is good to develop and articulate our arguments as well. Well, the first question I've got for you is shouldn't we be campaigning to move the Biden-Harris administration to the left?
That's interesting. I think there is my position is build workers' power, and in the fight for workers' power, train for revolution. And if you look at the movement train, the movement circle, movementism, tailism, as you call it, it goes in circles and it gets nowhere. I mean, it's based in superstructure. The economic base is we're in a decaying empire, and things have been getting worse and worse and worse ever since one of the first economic crashes of the 70s. I believe after that crash, every single crash after that, conditions have gotten worse. We have less wages, we have less buying power, we have less benefits, and the movement train can go on and talk about, you know, this social issue or that social issue, but they're not building working class power. They're not improving the lives of workers. They're simply running behind the Democratic Party and tailing minor spontaneous movements. What we need is to build working class power. We need to build up grassroots organizations and stop wasting our time with either one of these parties that don't give a fuck about us.
Yep, exactly.
Comrade Mansfield, any response? What would be your response to that?
Can you hear me now? I think I was muted there for a minute.
Yeah,
I think what you're saying, Dust, is correct. Of preparing for, like we mentioned earlier, preparing for the worst, but building that dual power, building communities that are aware of what's going on, communities that can survive when shit hits the fan, and communities that will thrive when we've created a socialist America. I think at least is the best way to move forward.
very good. Yeah, no, they were excellent answers. That was fantastic. Actually, too, this I know someone in the commentary, I think Severio. Apologies, I pronounced your name wrong there, but this flows on to the next question I've got as well, very similar. What was asked in the questions there. Shouldn't we be infiltrating these right-wing organisations to win those, such as the Trump supporters, over to socialism?
I would say we need to build working class power. Just how we don't join our local Democrats, we shouldn't be joining the local Republicans, and we especially shouldn't be joining these Proud Boys and all these other racist motherfuckers. We're not about building up those organizations. We're not undercover cops. That is not a good strategy. There's not the little bit of political energy we have needs to go to winning off people from the proletariat to the cause of socialism. We shouldn't be tailing the Democrats. We shouldn't be tailing the Republicans, and we should be forming defense groups against these right-wing groups, not going into and building up. Because when you go in and you join an organization, you're gonna be forced to do work for that organization. You don't need to be working for right-wing groups. That hurts you. That hurts your community. That shows division. We need to unite the working class, not divide it. Comrade Mansfield.
I think it's delusional to think that we could ever really infiltrate the Republican Party and somehow trick the RNC into running a socialist candidate for president. I think if we, and perhaps this is just because I'm surrounded by conservatives, I think if there's a group that we, as far as a group of excluding the oppressed nationalities, right, a group of white voters, liberal or Democrat or liberal or conservative, I think we should, right, because a conservative are not going to. There's this great analogy, and it's the split. Rural areas are not. They're not woke. They don't understand BLM and all these things, and it's generally not most of the time not a fault of their own. But someone who grew up in rural America will pull over and help you change your tire on the side of the road, or make sure you have groceries if you're sick. That is it is a communal sort of culture. Whereas cities, predominantly liberals, right? They'll sign petitions and post hashtag BLM, but they will step over 8 homeless people to buy a $5 cup of coffee. And I think that if any demographic that we should go for, it's going to be the rural demographic.
It's interesting analysis just put there too at the rural demographic. It's very similar here. If I say broke down or have something happen, I can guarantee you someone local nearby will just pull over to see if I'm okay, if I need any assistance, and or if I was in the outback or the remote area like in the Northern Territory. Same thing. People usually tend to slow down, see if you're okay, and need a bit of assistance. So it's a very good point you raised there. Well, this fires on to the last one we're discussing about, and it goes, with these current state of affairs as they are, don't you think socialism doesn't have a chance at all?
Wow, socialism doesn't have a chance. Well, let's talk about this. Let's talk about this. Probably, I don't like to refer back to him too much before he gets a big head, but Comrade Caleb Maupin book, City Builders and Vandals. Before, when I was a dogmatist Marxist-Leninist, I thought Stalin was the best leader that ever lived, and we need to replicate Stalin in the United States. That's what I thought. And honestly, that understanding did progress me. And that time in my life early on, being even a dogmatic Marxist-Leninist, it introduced me to scientific socialism. It introduced me the ideas of imperialism. But moving past that and being able to actually learn scientific socialism, I'm able to see the Soviet Union did great things and had great tasks in their time period. And Mao also made great advancements. And even today, the legacy of Stalin and Mao is found in the anti-imperialist bloc. And look at what the Chinese Communist Party has been able to do. Lift millions of people out of poverty, offer win-win trade, offer loans to the Bolivarian countries. Even countries that aren't formally socialist, like Iran, they have systems like Islam, not capitalism. They've been able to lift rural workers out of poverty. And then look at the Bolivarian revolutions that have gotten help and have interlocked with Iran and China. They've been compare the conditions in Venezuela or Nicaragua to Honduras or Puerto Rico. And socialism is alive and well and on the upsurge. China today is the America of the early 1900s. It is leading the way in technology. It is building infrastructure. It is the new modern movement. There was a modern movement where like people in England and London were amazed at what was going on in the United States. Today's modern movement is China and its planned economies that are leading the world towards the future of socialism. The march towards socialism has not stopped. It is on the march. And it's something we can be hopeful about, take inspiration from the anti-imperialist bloc, and find a new form of socialism that fits to our country, the United States and Australia, and address these contradictions that Comrade Mansfield was talking about, the exploitation of workers and farmers and oppressed nations, and build a socialist society in the United States. Comrade Mansfield.
I have only a sentence to say in response. The American dream is alive and well in China.
Fair enough. That's an excellent line, that. Well,
Right
that's
on.
it.
So,
Yeah, that's all the questions I've got today. So
that ends all of our planned program. Is there any last words or things that we need to say, Comrade Fox?
I don't know exactly. Look, it's a pleasure actually having Comrade Mansfield here on the show today. It's great listening to his perspective on things as well. And I believe he's I come across him, I think, in that last CPI webinar conference. I know someone made a comment about the CPI had to be cancelled last year. That was just out of everyone's control at that time. I believe Caleb has mentioned he wants to try and get another CPI this year, but everything's a little bit up in the air at the moment. So I would love to. I was planning to actually go to the first conference last year, but because of COVID-19, it just threw a spanner in the works. But look, overall, it's been a great discussion tonight. It's been a lively one as well, and it's good to see everyone's input in the comments section as well. I think it's been very educational. I've learned a fair bit as well, and it's been very inspiring. So thank you once again for being on our show.
Comrade Keaten Mansfield, anything to add before we close today?
I just want to say, David, Dust, thank you both so much for having me on. This was absolutely a highlight of my week, and I'm sure for the month. And any time that you need another good old boy on to be on the show, don't hesitate to let me know. I'm happy to do it, and I really appreciate being able to speak with you all.
All right, so I guess we'll go into our ending chant. We're getting better at this. Trust me, we didn't warn you about this. We try to do a chant at the end. So, guys, just attempt to repeat after me. Dare to struggle.
Dare to struggle.
Dare to win.
Dare to win.
All power to the people.
Struggle.
All power to the people.
Dare to win.
All right, good.
All power to the people.
All right, good night, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.